What is going on, and welcome back to Grand Prix World, where we're about to start the 2004 season of our playthrough. Sorry it's been a while since we've finished up the 2003 season, but we are back and I'm very happy to be back, and hopefully you guys are doing good. So without further ado, let's let these emergency vehicles go past my house. I'm not even going to cut that out. I've recorded this 3 times now. Right, let's do it. So we again won the Drivers' and Constructors' Championship, with Giancarlo Fisichella picking up his second championship in his second season with the team. It congratulates us for our dominance, but I wouldn't go so far as to say we were dominant. Now, how does the competition shape up this year? Let's find out. Okay, so let's take a look at who's driving where in just a moment, but first let's see how our drivers are shaping up. Well, I have to say, Fisichella has pulled out a lead over Diniz. They were much more evenly matched the season before last, and even last season the gap was relatively close. Fisichella is still faster, he's still more skilled. They're evenly matched when it comes to overtaking bad weather and concentration. Morale, everyone's very happy. It's shaping up pretty well, to be honest. Diniz is still on thin ice with us, given that he had a bit of a difficult season last season, and 9.6 million only gets you so far. Right, who is where? So obviously at Arrows we retain again Pedro Diniz. This is season number 6 for him with us, and he's got another 2 seasons to roll on his contract, so he's going to be a long-term fixture if he can regain the form that he lost last year. Fisichella is entering his 3rd season with the team. He too has got 2 seasons to run. Actually, Diniz has got 3 seasons to run, so exciting. Carl Eisen continues as our test driver. 33 years old, still not made a Formula 1 debut yet, so the chances are pretty slim for him, to be honest. But regardless, we're glad to have him on board. He's doing what we ask him to do, and he's not exactly expensive, so good on you. Benetton retain David Coulthard as their lead driver, although it is the final season of his contract. His skill set is shaping up pretty well, all in all. Certainly a top-level driver. He's raking in about 8 million at the moment, 32 years old. He's a solid leader for that team. I think he's sort of been the one constant for Benetton. Oh, where would we be without the Apple software updater crashing the game for us periodically? Nostalgia. Right. Shinji Nakano, former Arrows driver of course, had a touch-and-go season at Prost. Nothing really to write home about. He's on a 3-season deal, paying 4 million for his seat at Benetton. It's a good move for him. It's definitely a move forward from where he was. His skill set has not really developed much from when he left us, which kind of makes sense really, because he's not been enjoying much success. He's got 4 wins to his name and 1 fastest lap, so congratulations on that. To be fair, he's only had 6 less points races than Fisichella, but still, I think dropping him was the right thing to do, and I don't think he's really shown any sign of making us have cause to question that decision. Stefan Sarrazin, the French driver, 29 years old, no skills to speak of, so we won't bother. Interesting lineup at Ferrari. Michael Schumacher has once again left the team, and our target, Alexander Wurz, actually steps into the lead driver role. Now, he is less than half the price of Fisichella, and certainly comparable. In some areas, he's even better. I'm very disappointed still that we didn't get our hands on Wurz when the option was open to us, and we are overpaying comparatively for Fisichella. Now, assuming Fisichella's performance stays at around the level it's at or even improves, I would very much be open to having a Fisichella-Wurz partnership in the future, depending on whether we can keep Fisichella's wage demands within what we consider to be reasonable. Celso Moreira entering his 2nd season in the Ferrari driving seat. He is 28, Brazilian, very cheap. Has gained no skill points from what was a pretty respectable debut season, to be honest with you. He did okay. He did outperform Michael Schumacher on 1 or 2 occasions, and he didn't really disgrace himself. There were about 3 occasions, I think, where he qualified outside the top 10, and he had some some low finishes, but in general it was a pretty respectable debut considering he moved straight into a top tier team. Heinz-Harald Frentzen was another target of ours. He's currently being paid a handsome 7.2 million. This crashing problem has got really, really bad, guys. That's part of the reason it's taken so long to come back. Right. So yeah, Heinz-Harald Frentzen being paid 7.29 million just to test at Ferrari. He's 36 years old now. Excellent, excellent driver, all in all. Arguably even worth the money still at this age. I do expect he'll retire possibly at the end of his current contract, so we're talking end of this season. We may see him actually step away from the sport. A very interesting lineup over at Jordan, who certainly in the driver 1 role have gone backwards. Juan Pablo Montoya, who didn't really make many friends at Stewart, had a pretty dismal debut breakout with Tyrrell. He has gained a skill point, so we shouldn't admonish him too harshly, but he's certainly not lead driver material for a team the calibre of Jordan, who were a season or two ago our strongest rival. They seem to have gone backwards a little bit last year. I'd hope to see a bit of a bounce from them this season, to be honest. They're a team I've always had a lot of affection for. Obviously, we don't want them to have such a bounce that they begin to worry us. Michael Schumacher takes the number 2 driver role for 28.8 million pounds per season. Sorry, dollars. Yeah, what more do we need to say about Michael Schumacher, really? Arguably the greatest of all time. The game reflects that pretty closely. It's sort of him and Häkkinen dicing out for the number 1 driver in the game position, but let's be honest, he's totally out of our league, and I think what we can expect really is him to drag performances out of the Jordan, particularly in wet conditions that another driver just would not be capable of doing. I'd expect to see Jordan break the top 3 in qualifying ever so slightly when heavy rain persists, and maybe tracks like Spa, if we do get a wet qualifying session, I expect Schumacher to do really well even if he's in a mid-tier car. Ricardo Zonta returns to testing duties. He's on a 3-season deal with Jordan, and again nothing really to concern ourselves with. The strongest driver lineup on the grid, beyond much doubt, is McLaren, who did finish to the end of last season with a car superior to our own and able to outperform us in most respects. Häkkinen continues to basically lead the team. I mean, it's an equal number 1 driver deal. He's 35 years old. He's on 12 million a season, so less than half the price of Schumacher for a very, very similar skill set. What really needs to be said about Häkkinen? It's very much the same as Schumacher. He is a phenomenal driver. His legacy stands the test of time, just as all the great champions do. He's on a significantly long deal there, actually. He's got 4 seasons before he's free again. I guess that will take him out to the end of his career, so unless he walks away or gets fired, he's not even going to be on the market anyway, let alone before we broach the subject of him having that 12 million contract to buy out. Johnny Newhouse is on 14.2 million, 32 years old now, continues at McLaren. He's obviously not quite up to the standard of your Häkkinens or your Schumachers or even your Coulthards, but he's not far away from being the ultimate driver in the game, to be honest. I mean, if we picked him up, if he was cheap enough, picked him up seasons ago, the championships we picked up may have pushed him to almost filling out all these bars. Again, there's a random element there, but it is a possibility. Newhouse has been fairly up and down in his time at McLaren. I think occasionally he can deliver a masterful drive. Other times he's been qualifying way below where we would expect him to, with very little explanation as to why. Now, of course, we haven't monitored that too closely. If he was our own driver, we'd be very, very intimately concerned about why he has these periodic slumps where he's qualifying 12th or 13th and his teammate can manage a top 5 qualifying. So obviously he's a driver that's quite mercurial. He's got maybe a specific skill set or a specific synergy when it comes to car technology that on certain tracks you just can't extract the most from. Maybe this season we'll keep an eye on him actually and see if we can't diagnose that as an external observer. Jörg Müller is the test driver at McLaren, 37 years old, never going to make it to a race seat, I don't think. I don't think he's got long to run either. Down at Minardi, arguably a pretty significant step backwards for Minardi in terms of driver lineup this season, replacing Jan Magnussen and Mika Salo with Luca Badoa and Tora Takagi. Now, Luca Badoa is 33, Italian. He has gained skills in his time in Formula One. That's a pretty respectable rate of gain, to be honest with you, considering he was out of Formula One for the majority of this game. He's done okay. He's done okay with himself. He's on a 3-season deal. Costs are pretty significant. He's 100,000 a season more than we pay Carl Eisen, but he is commensurately more skilled, so I guess the economics works out. Tora Takagi's bringing 9.7 million for his race seat, and he's actually very, very respectable. Overtaking is the obvious weak point. He's not great in wet weather either, but the remainder of his skills are average or better, so I think he's actually, even though it's an equal number 1 status, I'd expect to see Takagi outperform Badoa 9 out of 10 times. If we don't see that, then that teaches us that whatever car Minardi have put together this season, or whatever package they run, it just doesn't suit Takagi as well. There's no reason, with a differential this big between drivers, that we should really see Badoa outperform Takagi more than once in a blue moon. Laurent Redon is their test driver, and again, no skills particularly worth bothering with. Again, taking a step backwards, Prost Alessandro Marini has been retained. He's on a very long contract with them, 5 seasons in total, so he's got another 3 seasons left to run on this deal. Marini was, again, very much up and down, very, very up and down during his time with Prost. Whether Prost benefit from having a degree of consistency here by having a constant in one of the driver seats is hard to really predict. There's too many other variables. If we were in control of the team itself, what you can do is try and build synergy with a particular driver, or find you've got synergy with a particular driver, and retain them long term and try and build a team around them. Now, you could argue that really should be what's happening with Deniz, but we've never really taken that approach. We've tried to figure out under what conditions our car works well, and we've tried to figure out, separate to that, how Deniz fares in various different conditions and on different compounds of tyre, but we've never specifically tried to tailor one to the other. So we've never taken what we know about Deniz and used that to decide how we develop and set up the car. I think maybe we could have benefited from doing that, but we never really knew if we were going to retain Deniz long term. And as we've already seen, he had an unacceptable season last season. We'll call it unacceptable. I know he finished quite well in the Drivers' Championship at the end, but he had, certainly the first half of the season was absolutely dismal, and we dropped a lot of points that we didn't need to drop. And given how close performance was at the end of the season, we know that he was capable of pulling out some decent drives. And given that we were roundly beaten by McLaren in a lot of aspects, I think dropping those points really does work against him. Now, that being said, I've digressed from myself. If from 1998 until now we had really focused on Deniz, and we'd really focused on finding out which engine he tends to perform best with, what tyre compound, how we should develop both of those things, then frankly maybe we could have got better out of him, but I don't see that as a beneficial way to run a team unless you are talking about a true star driver, someone like your Hills, your Schumachers, your Häkkinens, in which case it's in your interest to retain them even though they're very expensive, and then to get your money's worth out of them you have to really centralise the team on them. So you know that Schumacher, for example, is a great wet weather driver. That can lead you down one of two ways. Either you can accept that he's an amazing wet weather driver and that compensates for any deficiencies in the car's wet weather performance, so you maybe don't focus your testing so much on the full wet tyre, or you realise that's his strength and you tailor the car to that strength. So you immediately put a lot of effort into developing things like traction control, servo brakes and the wet weather tyre, and try and make use of that skill set earlier in the season. The problem with doing that, of course, is that there's a lot of random variables at play, and it might never rain. You can go an entire season without it raining, I imagine. And then you've kind of tailored the car in a way that you're going to get benefit when the conditions are right, but the conditions are so rarely right that you're not really going to get the benefit of all the money you're spending. A more consistent example, I suppose, would be looking at someone like maybe Wurtz or Frentzen, actually, who you tend to see perform quite well at open circuits, high speed circuits. So what you would then do is you would, I imagine, focus particularly on the soft tyre. You would definitely, again, look at things like active suspension and traction control, help them get off the line in particular, help them pick up speed quite quickly coming out of any slow corners on that circuit, because what you tend to find, I'm sure I don't need to tell you, is quite a few long straights pinched in by some fairly severe corners to try and balance out the requirements of the track. Now, there are some exceptions, for example, Spa, where the circuit does have a sort of changing character, but generally you're on throttle a hell of a lot of the time, and there's no benefit to balancing the car too much, but a lot of other circuits do try and balance things out a little bit. And you can just play to those strengths. You can make sure he's only ever on the soft compound tyre, even if occasionally there could be a benefit by one stopping rather than two stopping. The soft tyre is ultimately the faster tyre, so you make use of the fact that your driver is particularly strong at high-speed circuits. Maybe they have a high speed rating in their skill set, maybe it's just a natural affinity, and so you put them on the fastest tyre and you give them the tools that emphasize speed in particular. So you'll focus on engine development and soft tyre development before anything else. You can even argue that there's a case to focus your development solely on getting the best engine performance and not actually upgrading your chassis if money or resources are in any way tight. So it's a roundabout way of saying that keeping Marini may or may not be a bad decision. It depends how the AI is playing it. But he's not exactly the sort of driver I would build a team around, but it doesn't mean it's not a viable strategy. Esteban Tuero, who is shaping up quite nicely actually, brings 3.7 million to the table. Only 25 years old, quite a young driver still. I think that's a good signing for them. He brings money, he's young, his skills are very, very respectable. A 3-season deal seems a good developmental range for a driver of this caliber. So you can sort of see if he can bring some results to the team that maybe Marini's not capable of, and you can see if he gains any skill points in the process, and if so, you can keep him on. But that 3-season window gives you a good chance to get the measure of the driver, it gives him a chance to settle into the team, and it gives him a chance to adjust to the cars that you build. I would rate that as a pretty good signing. What I wouldn't rate as a good signing is a team like Prost spending $14.4 million per season to put a driver of the standard of Damon Hill into a test seat. He is 43 years old, so his career arguably should have ended 4 or 5 seasons ago. But credit to him, he's sticking it out. He signed a 4-season test deal. I would be very surprised if he sees that out without being moved to a race seat at some point. The best thing that could happen to this team, I hate to say it, is for Marini to bin it into turn 1 in Australia and injure himself in some way, and for Damon Hill to be automatically promoted to a race seat until Marini recovers. I think Hill and Tuero could actually be a very, very good combination. Hill's got a lot to teach. He'd be a great leader for the team, and Tuero is definitely an up-and-coming young gun. He's a driver, like Moriera actually, that in most of the games I've played tends to develop quite well and can go on to become a top-tier driver. So my criticism of Prost really would be Marini not being in the test seat. Given they managed to land Hill for 4 seasons, whether that's a good idea or not given his age, and Tuero for 3, I think a Hill and Tuero pairing would have been a valuable asset to them, but nevertheless they made the call they made. Over at Sauber, Jean Alesi continues with the team again. 10.3 million for a 39-year-old Frenchman. Don't know if that's good value for money, but his skill set is certainly respectable. Again, that's a pretty good lineup considering they've paired him with Sarlo. Now, Sarlo didn't do so good with arrows, we know that. That's why we fired him. 37 finish, 3 million a season, so he's got noticeably more expensive, but let's not forget that while he didn't have a great run with arrows, he did redeem himself with 2 or 3 very respectable seasons at Minardi, where he was consistently a top 10 qualifier, a top 10 finisher on race day. He really did bring a lot to the table for that team, and I think him moving to Sauber to partner Alesi is actually a pretty good deal for Sauber and Sarlo. I think that's a mutually beneficial deal. Alesi should arguably be a bigger team given his skill set, but I think, for a guy coming to the end of his career, it's a pretty good place to be. The weird thing is Ralf Schumacher being in the test seat. There's a lot of high caliber drivers that are sitting this season out. In fact, several seasons out. He's another 5-seasoner. To sit on testing duty, it's very, very, very weird, but it does open up drive seats for other drivers, and I'm glad to see Sarlo still sort of ticking over. I think he could have a pretty interesting season at Sauber, provided that they take a step forward from last year when they were kings of Sad Town. Over at Stewart, Jan Magnussen returns to the team after a stint away. He's been at Minardi, and I think he was also, if I remember correctly, he was at Prost for a bit, but I digress. He's 2 points races to his name, so nothing spectacular there, but look at how his skill set has come along. Bearing in mind, he was a driver that started the game with 1s and 2s across the board, I think. Maybe concentration was a 3. He's picked up points almost every season. I still wouldn't sign him. His morale is poor for a start. His speed is very, very low. However, for Stewart, I think the main thing is that his concentration is quite high, which means his chances of getting to the end of the race, which is all important for a team like Stewart, are relatively high, and he's capable in wet weather. Nothing special, but he's certainly not going to bin it just because a few drops of rain hit the track. Teaming with him is ridiculously haired Frenchman Emmanuel Collard. 32 years old, still looks like a Muppet reject, and no skill gain really worth noting. His morale's reasonable though, which means what little he's got to offer is going to be delivered almost in full. John Fellows, our former test driver, who we were going to promote to a race seat, has continued to live in the doldrums and is testing at Stewart now. 1 season deal. His pay hasn't really improved either. I think really him leaving us when he did has worked against him, because it was touch and go about whether it could be him now partnering Deniz, whether we'd still be winning championships. Certainly last season we probably wouldn't have done, but the season before Deniz did perform well enough to have won the championship, so the Fellows really would have either been a bonus, or he would have performed poorly and we would have fired him. But either way, his career would have taken certainly a more of an upward trajectory, if only for a season. Ricardo Rosset returns to Tyrrell to partner Jarno Trulli. Interesting lineup there. 4.3 million Rosset is bringing. His skill set's increased. His concentration's really good, so statistically he's going to finish more often than not, which doesn't really play into how I remember him as a driver. 2-season deal. I think really it's all about the money here, and 4.3 million is a pretty respectable amount for Tyrrell to receive for the race seat. I'm not going to criticise too much. I think they probably need the money, and that's fair enough. Jarno Trulli, on the other hand, I'm going to say was an excellent signing for them. He cost them 2 million. His skills seem to have gone backwards actually, because I don't recall him being, within the context of the game of course, a driver this poor. Whether he's lost points through being a succession of very poorly performing teams, I don't know. But his time at Benetton partnering Coulthard certainly didn't improve the matter for him. He's still a driver that's perpetually on my radar because I have a lot of affection for him. I always liked him as a driver. He's still relatively young in terms of the game as well. While I say at this point we probably wouldn't sign him, I think he's a reasonable match for Tyrrell, and certainly better than running Juan Pablo Montoya again. Patrick Rainbow, best name in the world, not the best driver in the world. Very, very weird potato nose. Again, he's one of the unsigned young quote-unquote drivers, and he has not really gained anything through being in testing seats at various teams. He doesn't do any harm in a testing seat, but he's essentially interchangeable with any of the other non-F1 drivers at this stage. Last but by no means least, Williams, continuing with the partnership of Herbert and Irvine. I think this is the third season we're entering now, actually, where that's been the lineup at Williams, and they have delivered fairly consistently. I'd say Herbert and Irvine are a very, very strong pairing. They've been able to fairly consistently deliver points, even podiums. Irvine's skill set has definitely developed. Look how good he is. Herbert as well, very, very respectable. Certainly not at the level of Irvine, but still good enough. I'd expect to see them get a degree of success, maybe staying around where they were last season, but regardless, I'd expect them to pick up a decent amount of points and certainly be in the top 4 at the end of the season. Montemini moves back into a testing role after spending some time at Stewart. His time in the race seat has done nothing at all to develop him whatsoever. He does have a fastest lap to his name, which will be an interesting pub trivia fact, but aside from that, nothing worth noting. Panis and Barrichello are both retired, and the remainder are literally nobodies. So that's how they line up on the grid. Let's go over to technical land and see what power and so on everybody is running this season. Right. Actually, breaking with tradition, we should look at the team sponsors. So, East will be sponsoring Williams for this season. Sauber will be sponsored by Murano. That's very interesting, actually, with East and Murano sponsoring Williams and Sauber there. That means Sauber have got a decent amount of money coming in, as do Williams. That, combined with their driver lineups, could actually be a strong driver for both of those outfits. The other 5-star sponsor, Winfried, will be partnering with Ferrari until the end of 2005. Playlife will be backing us, so we are Playlife Arrows Ford this season. Blondes sponsor Prost, Buzzing Hornets McLaren, and Red Bull will be sponsoring Benetton. Who are the big losers there then? Jordan. I would say Jordan is the biggest loser in that because they do not have a team sponsor. That's going to really hit them where it hurts because, as we know, team sponsors bring in 15 million or more a season, often as much as 30 to 40 million a season. It's a lot of money to find yourself without. It really, really is. Now, you can offset it a little bit by bringing pay drivers and restricting your development, but nothing is good about losing a team-sponsored deal. It's one of those things where you can be quite respectable without a team sponsor. We did quite well without a team sponsor for a while. We constantly moved forward. We were a competent mid-level team. We picked up points fairly reliably. And then once you get a team sponsor, then obviously you can take quite a significant step forward. What does hurt more than never having a team sponsor is having one and losing it. Because you've already begun to spend that money, you've expanded your infrastructure, which increases your monthly costs, and before you know it, you're running a deficit very, very, very quickly indeed, which means you have to sell off factory upgrades, you have to fire whole bunches of staff, and that can actually cost you even more money because staff can successfully sue you for unfair dismissal. That is in the game. We haven't seen it yet because our team's only had to grow, but regardless, it's a very significant kick in the pants for Jordan to be without a team sponsor this season. Moving over to the world of engines, let's see what spec everyone's got. Now that is interesting. The first thing that we're all going to see is that us moving away from Mercedes was definitely the right call to make because their engine has gone backwards. It has definitely gone backwards. They're no longer the top rated engine manufacturer. For some reason Ferrari have moved into the top slot. I don't know why, because I still think, looking at it, Mercedes has a higher point score, but maybe the algorithm reads how the points are distributed. But at the moment the game considers Ferrari to be the number one engine manufacturer. They're only powering Ferrari, so I'm sure negotiations were difficult. Mercedes, however, will be powering Williams, Jordan and Prost. Mercedes, looking at it, is not actually a terrible engine, but it's certainly not to the standard they were providing last season, so there's going to be a lot of development points going into that to get it anywhere near being competent. The engine has got heavier, it's still very, very poorly cooled, and it's still got fuel economy issues that are going to hurt it. As well as that, its power level has gone back 3 points. Responsiveness and rigidity stay about the same. Reliability has also gone backwards. It could be that we were the only works team last season, and maybe their own research and development didn't offset that, but yeah, it doesn't look particularly good. Peugeot, on the other hand, have stayed relatively consistent. They will be powering Tyrrell this season. That's a pretty good fit, all in all. I think that's pretty reasonable. Now, the big winners, from what, as far as I can tell, is Mugen Honda. That engine, considering they never provide work steels and their research and development is generally quite slow, whatever change they've made between this season and last has been very, very, very meaningful indeed. They are a mere 2 points off the back of Ford in terms of power, Ford providing the most powerful engine this season. The heat management on the Mugen unit is very, very respectable. The engine is equally as light as Peugeot, which is second only to Ferrari in terms of overall weight. So the Mugen Honda unit is lighter, more heat tolerant, and more fuel economic than the Mercedes unit. It's equally matched on power. It's slightly less reliable, but it is more rigid and more responsive. Yeah, I would say that Stewart and Minardi have come up winners from their switches. Stewart were previously a Mercedes team at some stage. Minardi were, I believe, powered by Peugeot. Both of those teams will benefit from that move because that Mugen unit looks very, very good. And if I knew it was going to be that good, I would have perhaps considered it. As a fallback option should no work steel have been available to us. I don't think those teams are going to suffer too much from not having a work steel here. That engine looks very, very passable, and it will be several rounds before the likes of Mercedes or Peugeot or even Ferrari in some respects can develop their engine to match it. We will be switching to Ford units. This is our first time running with Ford power. Returning to Ford are both McLaren and Benetton, which have both been Ford teams in the past. Now, as we know, at the start of our game, for the first 2 to 3 seasons, Ford were actually the dominant engine manufacturer. They never reached the top spot because I don't understand really how the algorithm works, which ranks these engines and whatever's keeping Peugeot third. But I'm guessing it's a combination of the engine they produce plus the financial incentives that are available and the development rate. However, Ford have returned to a pretty respectable specification of engine. The obvious weak point is reliability, which will be our priority to resolve, but it's got a mid-range heat tolerance, it's the most powerful engine on the grid, it's the most fuel efficient engine on the grid. Responsiveness is very, very good. It's a mid-weight engine, so it's still quite heavy, and it's in the mid-range for rigidity. Obviously, all three teams, Arrows, McLaren and Benetton, will be focusing primarily on returning a level of reliability to the engine, but the remainder of the stats are in a pretty good place for a start of a season. If I didn't have the ability to test, if I had no ability to develop this engine, I would prefer to take the Mugen Honda or the Mechachrome based on how the stat points are distributed. But as a works team, I'm perfectly happy with this Ford specification. I really do like it. Obviously, there's a chance of engine failure at Australia, but we can shake off problems at the start of the season. It's reliability problems at the mid to late season that really cost you. So I'm fine with that. I think really everyone's in a good place that's sat with Ford at the moment. Again, no one's taken the Hart deal. There are 2 slots at the back there for Toyota and Renault, who still have not entered the sport. And Sauber will be powered by Mechachrome, which again is a pretty good move for them. The obvious weakness here is the rigidity in the engine. That means a lot of vibration passes through the bodywork, and you can end up losing the rear wing and parts of the bodywork. It can cause some reliability problems, so we'll keep an eye on Sauber, but they've got a good team sponsored, they've got a good driver lineup, and the engine is very respectable, provided the chassis is strong enough to deal with the vibration from the power unit. I think they've got a pretty potent package, to be honest, and they should return to the upper midfield. On the tyre front, who are the winners and losers there? Well, when it comes to face value, I would say that Bridgestone returned to the top of the pile. Yes, they do. Goodyear are not looking particularly sexy, actually, in terms of the dry compounds. The temperature score of the soft tyre for Goodyear is pretty good, and obviously the rigidity of the hard tyre. But tyre life and grip are poor on the hard tyre compared to the Bridgestone hard. I suppose the soft compounds are a bit more evenly matched, and Goodyear do have the superior intermediate tyre, but the full wet award definitely goes to Bridgestone. Yeah, I think that's a reasonably fair way to start the season, although I do feel Goodyear have been heavily penalised on the hard compound. Regardless, though, I think there's between the changeable conditions, assuming you have a race that goes from intermediates to wets, or wets to intermediates, or dries to intermediates, dries to full wets, or whatever, you're going to see some shift around in the performance of the cars, which, let's be honest, is what we're aiming for, to make the sport interesting. So, all in all, yeah, that's a pretty fairly balanced distribution, but I feel I would be happier if we were on Bridgestone rubber this season. Running Bridgestone will be Jordan with a work steel, so that's their only work steel, I believe. Prost, Sauber, and Minardi. Benetton also have a Bridgestone work steel, actually. We're a Goodyear Works partner, as are Williams. McLaren, Stewart take the partner deals, and Ferrari and Tyrrell are the customers. Some big teams there on Goodyear rubber. Another win for Sauber, though. They're definitely on the right tyre. They've got a good engine, they've got a good driver lineup, they've got a team sponsor. I'm beginning to like how they look more and more. Still a little bit worried about the fact Benetton don't pick up works deals all that often, but it is good to see them on Works Bridgestone rubber this season. Moving over once more, let's take a look at the fuels. Now, I forget who we're running. I think we're running Mobil. Yes, we are. So let's take a look at our fuel first. About squarely in the middle, a little below average, to be honest. Looking at it, I'm sorry for the pause there, but looking at it, it would appear to me that all the fuel and race lubricant providers have actually produced a worse compound this season than they did the season before. I still think we're on a pretty good level because we are middle of the road in both power and engine tolerance. But again, there's no real strength there. But given where everyone else is, I think it's better to be there than to have a weakness in one area over another. Now, opposite ends of the spectrum are Texaco and Total, Total being the kindest towards engines, and Texaco being the most powerful race fuel. Would I switch us? I think actually Petrobras would be the only out of the gate better option, but they don't provide a works deal. So given that we receive money for running Mobil and we can develop the fuel ourselves, I still think actually we're on the best deal we could be. Agip's another one that's comparable, but again, you don't get a works deal with them. You can't really control development. So all in all, I think we've made the right choice. The other works fuel supplier is Shell, which is inferior to Mobil in both respects here. So it would be more expensive to develop the fuel. Comparatively, we'd have to spend 2 more development points than we will for Mobil. So yeah, we've made the right call. We have made the right call. Running Shell is McLaren and Benetton, both with works deals. Mobil will be ourselves with a works deal, and Ferrari on a partner deal. Texaco will be providing to Williams as a partner. Agip are a customer supplier to Minardi and Stewart. Total will be providing their services to Tyrrell, as well as Sauber. Esso have no partners, Repsol and Petrobras have no partners. Elf, however, will be providing to Jordan as a partner and Prost as a customer. Yeah, Sauber have come out of this pretty well again. I mean, they've not really excelled in any particular area, but they've made sensible choices, or let's call it what it is, lucky choices, in every respect. They've got a great driver lineup, they've got a respectable power unit, they've got the right tyres, they've got the best of a bad bunch when it comes to fuels. I'd expect to see them go forward. So, Where do I think everyone's going to stand? And I'm sorry that this is not really in keeping with our usual pre-season analyses, but I'm doing the best I can given the state of the crashing and whatnot. So I apologise if this has all been a bit rambly and a bit scatterbrained. However, I think we're in a pretty reasonable position to make some projections, so let us try and do that. I still think big winners are going to be Sauber. They finished 7th last season. I would expect them to come out around the level where Jordan are now. I think our biggest rival is almost certainly going to be McLaren. So I wouldn't expect the top two to change. They might change in order, but they shouldn't change all in all. Williams, I could see leapfrogging Ferrari. Ferrari 4th or 5th in the constructors, I would imagine. Jordan, sadly, I see maybe going backwards, although I hope not. Prost and Sauber should take a step forward. Minardi will go backwards. Benetton, I would hope, would return to points-paying positions, so I could see them taking 7th or 8th. It could also be they have a Williams or a Ferrari moment and make a miraculous recovery to be a top 5 team again, but it sort of seems a tall order given where they stand this season in terms of a lack of work steals. Tyrrell and Stewart, I don't expect to see massive improvements from either of those, although they've not made any terrible decisions. There's no howlers in there that I think, wow, you're going to really pay for that choice. Yeah, I think the big losers then will be, I imagine, Prost and Jordan, looking at it. Particularly Jordan. I don't see Jordan retaining a top 5 constructors finish next season. Big gainers, almost certainly Sauber. Benetton, I'm pretty sure of as well, and Williams. McLaren I expect to be fairly consistent. So, predicting the top 3 at the end of the season. I'm going to say that we win the championship again. I'm not 100% confident in it, but it feels like if I don't have faith in us, who will? So I'm going to say Arrows, McLaren, Williams. Arrows, McLaren, Williams, Ferrari, Sauber for your top 5. We will see how that pans out over the course of the season. In terms of Drivers' Championship, I could actually see a McLaren driver take the honours this season, given that Hakkinen and Newhouse are 2 of the best drivers in the game, and they've got an amazing package behind them, and they've got the full financial muscle of the McLaren group. I don't really see anyone else in the running. Do I think Deniz will come back on song? I certainly fucking hope so, but there's never any guarantees in this sport, and there's no guarantees in this game either. Anyway, that has been your pre-season build-up episode for the 2004 season. I am incredibly grateful for you guys being patient and for joining me for this episode. I'm sorry there's been a big gap. We will be back on normal service as of today. In fact, straight after this, I'm going to record rounds 1 and 2 for you, I imagine, so I can put those out later in the week. There will be some more Stellaris with Corrent coming up, and there will be some more one-on-one stuff where you and I get to bro down and play video games. Other than that, I hope you've had an amazing weekend. I'm sorry it's Monday tomorrow, nothing I can do about it, it's out of our hands, but hopefully it's kind to you. You guys take it easy.